Nader Shah Afshar was born around either 1698 or 1699 in the province of Khorasan into the nomadic pastoralist Afshar tribe of Oghuz Turkoman origin. After escaping a life of slavery from marauding Uzbeks, Nader enlisted as a musketeer in the army and eventually rose through the ranks to become the right-hand man of the governor of Khorasan during the reign of the Iranian Safavid Empire. By the year 1724, the Safavid Empire was in complete chaos. After ruling Iran, most of Iraq, and parts of Central Asia for over 200 years, they were beset upon by enemies on all sides. Just 2 years prior, Gilzai Mir Mahmud Hotaki of the rebellious Afghan Hotaki dynasty had managed to overthrow the ruling Safavid Shah Sultan Hussein. At the same time, lands were seized by the expansionist Ottoman Turks and by the Russian Empire under Peter the Great in the east and north respectively. During the chaos, Nader had managed to broker a deal with the Hotaks to rule the city of Kalat. However, as soon as Mahmud Hotaki began demanding the allegiance of all his new subjects, Nader refused and instead began raising his own army in rebellion. Sultan Hussein's son had declared himself Shah Tahmasp II and sought support from the Qajar tribe to reclaim the throne. Tahmasp also asked Nader to join their cause, and he agreed. Nader soon became the chief of the royalist army, and knew that many battles were to be fought in order to save Iran from total collapse, and thus began a series of military reforms that would not only lead to the expulsion of Iran's enemies, but help establish what was arguably one of the strongest superpowers in the world for a brief period. The campaigns undertaken by Nader Shah deserves its own series, which I hope to cover in the near future. But for now, we are taking a look at the new structure of the Persian army that would be the standard in the subsequent Afsharid dynasty. At the beginning, Nader had inherited the remaining army of the Safavids, which consisted of a small corps of foot musketeers and artillerymen, but was a primarily cavalry-based force armed with lances, swords, and bows, which were mostly supplied from the nomadic tribes of the controlled regions. For many years, there had been a general reluctance amongst the military elites on the usage of gunpowder weapons, mainly due to the fact that for centuries the main standard of warfare in Persia and Central Asia revolved around horse archery. Unlike their European counterparts, which relied on the crushing effects of a direct heavy cavalry charge in dense formations and the usage of firearms with their dragoons, cavalrymen in the east utilized loosely formed light cavalry armed with bows. This is also why Eastern infantry in this period did not see the need in equipping bayonets. This was the case for 3 reasons. One was that horses made great targets for enemy muskets, and many did not want to risk losing their horses, which the troops themselves paid for. Nader Shah subsequently supplied horses to his cavalry at his own expense in order to resolve this issue. Another was that bows offered a much faster rate of fire as opposed to firearms, which were much more awkward and difficult to load on horseback. The second was for a deeper cultural reason. To the Persians, the firearm was seen as a dirty and dishonorable weapon, whereas weapons such as the lance and bow were viewed as more noble. Nader had a complete opposite attitude towards gunpowder weapons, and decided to utilize the full potential of these firearms in order to defeat all of Persia's many enemies, beginning a new revolution in the military. Since the time of the Safavids, the musket-armed infantry of the army were the Tofangchi, now greatly expanded under Nader. The entire infantry corps of the Afsharids had a standardized uniform of blue tunics and red trousers, with the tall hat referred to as Khola-i-Naderi. The Tofangchi also carried melee weapons such as either a long Hanjar dagger or the Persian Shamshir curved sword. The Jazayirchi were a newly implemented corps of elite musketeers that wielded Jazayir flintlock muskets of a heavier caliber than those of the Tofangchi or even by their European counterparts, along with Shamshir's melee weapons. The average European musket weighed around 5 kilograms and fired a shot only 18 millimeters in diameter, whereas the Jazayir weighed almost 18 kilograms and fired a shot 24 millimeters in diameter, although one drawback was that it took longer to reload. Nader placed much greater emphasis on continuous training and drilling in order to fire and maneuver as if they were parts of a single organism. One eyewitness to these training sessions gives this description. The infantry, I mean those that carried muskets, would get together in their own units and they would shoot their guns at a target and exercise continuously. If Tahmasp Quli Khan saw an ordinary soldier consistently on top form, he would promote him to be a leader of 100 men or a leader of 50 men. He encouraged all the soldiers toward bravery, ability, and experience, and in simple words, he himself gave an example of strong character and military virtue. Despite the Jazayirchi being an infantry corps, they occasionally fought as mounted troops. That said, they were used to achieve the hardest and most crucial tactical tasks due to their high quality as elite fighting troops, and proved their worth in many of Nader Shah's most famous battles. During the Battle of Karnal, one contemporary noted, "An arrow cannot answer a Jazayir." Nader divided his cavalry corps into two groups, those that were recruited by the central government and those that were pressed into service from subjugated lands and submissive tribal peoples. Compared to their neighboring Ottoman rival counterparts, Persian cavalry were generally superior. Basil Vatatzes again writes, "They attacked from all sides, circling in any new direction. The ranks closed in and then they would charge and then disperse, after which this same scattered group would close ranks on the same point. They would feign a retreat and then counterattack." By 1736, muskets finally became the standard weapons of the cavalry, which enabled further mobility for both scouting and skirmishing. An elite division in Nader's cavalry corps was the Savaran-i-Sipahi Khorasan, which can be translated as the Riders of the Army of Khorasan. These were drawn primarily from the Hilzai, Abdali, Kurds, and other tribal elements in the empire. The Afghan horsemen, both Hilzai and Abdali, were among the very finest of Shah cavalry in Asia. Elements within the Savaran-i-Sipahi Khorasan were occasionally promoted by Nader to the Savaran-i-Sultanati, which was Nader's personal guard. The Savaran-i-Sipahi Khorasan played a decisive role in the final phase of the Battle of Kars, in which 40,000 of them participated in a massive flank attack, led by Nader Shah personally. Artillery was never fully embraced by the previous Safavid military, and was limited to very small use within the army. But like with all other gunpowder weapons fully implemented into his new military, Nader certainly made no exceptions with artillery. Despite Nader Shah's campaigns being conducted with great aggressive speed, Nader did his best to ensure that heavy guns were kept up with the army. Previously, the main centers of Persian artillery production were in Amol, Kermanshah, Isfahan, and Merv. Each of these cities produced high-quality artillery pieces, but Nader wanted to utilize mobile workshops so as to maintain high mobility while preserving versatility in the deployment of heavy siege cannons when necessary. One of Nader's key artillery units were the Zamburakchi, a corps of 1 or 2 pounder swivel guns mounted on the back of camels. They were rather inaccurate and short in range compared to regular field artillery, but had the clear advantage in mobility and when massed could deliver a devastating volley. Hundreds of Zamburaks were maintained by the Persian army. Benefiting from Nader's reforms, the Persian field artillery became superior to both the Ottoman and in particular the Mughal artillery. In the battles of Yerevan and Kars, the Persian guns fired more accurately and attained a significantly higher rate of fire than their Turkish counterparts. Persian artillery was also very effective in Nader's Central Asian campaign, as the warriors of the Central Asian Khanate were unfamiliar with engaging armies with modernized artillery and gunpowder. The military reforms of Nader Shah were arguably one of the main factors that not only helped revive the Iranian realm after the power of the Safavids crumbled, but also helped create a powerful new war machine that showed the world Nader Shah's true military prowess. As mentioned previously, the details of the campaigns of Nader Shah deserves its own series, which I hope to cover in the near future after my series on the Swedish invasion of Poland and the beginning of the Great Northern War.